The following program contains descriptions of sexual violence.
There's a culture of silence in the industry because most people live in fear.
I was 15 and he was 42.
My agency was manipulating me. It's human trafficking.
You will all be providing your testimonies as part of the French criminal investigation.
Jean-Luc is exposed as a rapist, but he continued to work.
I was completely in shock at how expansive this web is.
Having the hope of him standing trial was like, yes. And if he could get convicted and then have it just go.
I just don't understand how that even happened. I just don't understand it.
Doesn't matter if we were fucking models. It's a human rights violation, period.
Over the last year, the Model Alliance has been supporting survivors of Gerald Marie. 6 of them have traveled from across the world to testify to the French police about the abuse they suffered by their former modeling agent, Gerald Marie.
I look at my journey to get to this point, 30 years.
Nobody talks about it until someone does it first. So I'll go first. I'm older. I can do it. I want other people to not have shame.
It's not until you take a step back from the situation and realize exactly the level of abuse that you experienced.
We all have collectively been waking up to a very painful reality of what we actually did endure. I really thought that everything that was happening was just happening to me. I had no idea the level that I now comprehend.
April 8th, 1986, and it skips, and then it totally changes handwriting. And it says June 12th, before and after the rape. And I'm back home and writing in my journal, and I'm like, I hate myself. I just keep crying. I don't leave the house. I think I'm going insane. This pain of misery is too great to be tolerated anymore. I will do something drastic. And I was seriously thinking I was suicidal. Yeah. I just went home and I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell my boyfriend. I didn't tell anyone. For the next 2 years, I was completely shut down about it, did not want to talk about it. And then I couldn't wake up in the morning. My mom, she's like, why aren't you getting up and what's wrong with you? She said, you're going to go to a therapist. And I didn't even tell the woman the story. I felt like in some way I failed because I thought I was smarter.
It was clear that any money that I did make was going to go back to the agency. I was holding a round-trip ticket Elite had paid for me. I got on that plane to Northern California and got out of that situation. I'm so grateful that I got away. When I came back to California, it gave me enough space to settle, to cry a lot, to gain weight. I was still in that, like, how do I enter this industry on my terms? I'd spent time getting a portfolio in Europe. I had a cover. I'd found an agent and I could actually get paying work, like for the first time. I started to work with Guess, Calvin Klein, Donna Karan. I was doing much better in some ways, but of course, I still had not told anyone Gerald Murray had raped me when I was 17. I was still keeping a really intense secret. This was one of the first Vogue covers to have 2 women on it. When I got a call that I was going to go to Greece and that Linda Evangelista was going to be the other model, my heart sank. I felt incredibly insecure. Linda was married to Gerald at this point, and so it was this like dirty, horrible secret, and I'm sure he hadn't told her. So I was just incredibly uncomfortable and incredibly ashamed. I was trying to portray beauty and youth and sexy and happy and carefree, and I was so like heavily burdened by the experiences that I'd had that first round in Paris. Linda was and is an incredible model. So to show up with like someone iconic like Linda, who was married to my rapist, was incredibly like mind-blowing. I got through it, but it was really a rough shoot for me. It was really triggering. And she couldn't have known any of that. And I didn't have the tools and ability to articulate any of it.
After I was raped, I decided to leave the industry. I went back home. I just wanted to leave the bad memories behind me. The fact that I can talk about this and I still feel trauma in my body and I still feel like I'm on the verge of crying says a lot, because a lot of time has passed and I thought I dealt with it, but speaking about it brings up a lot of negative emotions. So, I mean, you know, I can see patterns in my past relationships where, you know, that broken part of me came out.
J'ai commencé à travailler en partenariat avec l'agence Élite de 1998 en rencontrant les gens d'Élite. J'ai petit à petit commencé à comprendre que le mannequin attirait beaucoup de prédateurs. C'était pas n'importe qui. C'était des milliardaires, des millionnaires, des gens très puissants. Et il y a une loi d'Omerta dans le milieu de la mode qui fait que personne ne parle. C'est-à-dire, c'est vraiment un principe, c'est de ne jamais rien dire. Leur fait peur en disant, si tu vas parler, tu vas avoir des problèmes.
I spent 10 years covering fashion. I then wrote a book that many people probably would have preferred was not written. And on these trips to Europe where I did these interviews and where I fielded threats occasionally, I did feel paranoid. I had kept all of my tapes of these interviews in someone else's apartment, not in my hotel room. Because again, I was a little nervous about what these people were capable of. I felt that I was dealing with people who were capable of just about anything.
Ever since I had quit Elite, I had been trying to speak out to the media in Chicago, but nobody would listen. There's a culture of silence in the industry because most people live in fear. I have been very shunned by the industry for speaking out. I have had amazing amounts of people who have gone out of their way to prevent me from getting back into the agency business.
Fashion, a huge global industry fueled by the dreams of young girls everywhere. The fashion industry doesn't want you to see this world, but tonight you will. Undercover.
There was an expose on the BBC in 1999, which in part focused on Gerald Marie.
No, what do you have in stock, Gerard? I have like little pieces of octopussy. Voilà.
Gerald seems to have only one train of thought, and as he says himself, he's in the right industry.
I was in London the year that the expose came out.
Keep only 15 girls. We don't make it. I just
I'm watching it going, I know this, you know, I know this world. This is what Shauna was telling me about.
Starting at 12 in the morning, we keep the 15 best ones.
Yeah.
To do pictures for this, for that. And all the guests and everybody leaves. We just stay, a few of us, with only the 15.
Gerald and the young models are down on the beach. Their average age is 15. The youngest girl in the contest is 13.
I remember seeing the BBC doc at the time. I was 22, and I remember I was silently happy, thinking that, okay, you know, these men are being held accountable, and, you know, life took care of itself, and, you know, they're gonna go down. You basically caught Gerald Marie on camera, and it really looked like he was trying to sleep with girls at the look of the year. It hit home because I was like, yeah, that was me. And it also validated everything, like all the confused feelings I had around that experience, and, you know, the blame that the blame that I put on myself. And it just kind of exposed what, like, a pig that man is.
I got a VHS tape of that documentary and I watched it. I'm like, hello, people. This is what I've been saying. This did happen. Sexual impropriety, like, all of it was true. And I was so excited that it was going to now be worldwide knowledge.
The final itself is packed with the world's press and television. Everyone is there, including John Casablancas, the founder of the company and the competition.
Today they're brand new kids, and they are the elite of tomorrow as far as we're concerned.
Yet again, Gerald is on the judging panel.
Friend and President of Elite Europe, Gerald Marie.
Pendant cette période-là, comme moi j'étais en partenariat avec l'agence Elite, un jour, Gerald Marie demande à nous voir. On était plusieurs responsables de l'agence Elite. On s'est vu dans un restaurant à Paris, là où il dit, écoutez, il s'est passé quelque chose de grave. En fait, pendant les 6 derniers mois, Donald McIntyre, que je vous ai présenté comme rédacteur en chef de mode, c'était un journaliste qui faisait un reportage en cachette, qui filmait pendant toute cette période-là. Et donc, il va bientôt avoir un documentaire qui va sortir. Il faut qu'on se prépare. Et Gerald Marie, il tremblait. Il avait très, très peur.
Donc, Gerald Marie, la France entière parle de vous. Aujourd'hui, vous êtes démissionnaire.
Non, je me suis suspendu volontairement. Je suis un des plus gros actionnaires d'Élite, donc je prends des positions de recul pour mieux défendre mon histoire. En fait, c'est une non-affaire, cette histoire. Vous comprenez, on a cherché à rapporter encore de l'opprobre sur Élite, parce que c'est vendeur, c'est très porteur, Élite. Hein. Donc, on s'est retrouvé devant un événement pareil, qui est un truc très choquant et très, très moche pour la profession, mais on est tellement facilement attaquable. Les gens sont beaux, ils gagnent bien leur vie, ils s'amusent.
La position officielle de Elite était gérée par Gérald Marie. Ils ont dit, d'abord, on dit que Gérald Marie démissionne. Mais en réalité, Gérald était quand même le vrai président. Mais on fait semblant pour la presse.
I was watching very closely to see who was going to say what and who was going to come forward with more information and the list of victims. Like, I was really expecting all this. It felt like this, finally, justice. The documentary had to be retracted and never shown again. And that was just crushing, because it was all there.
Joe Casablancas savait pendant toute la période que Gérald Marie était un prédateur sexuel. Il savait qu'il avait un comportement, il agressait les filles sexuellement. Et il a toujours fermé l'œil, comme tout le monde.
I think that Gerald is terrific.
Gerald will come back to Elite.
But Gerald never left Elite.
Right.
No.
He's running it out of his apartment.
Yeah.
He never left.
I think that wanting Gerald out is crazy and it's stupid. Okay, because that agency would have no more.
But Gerald's behavior must change.
No, behavior and participation.
Okay.
I think that Gerald will work in a very different way. I think he will have very, very little to do with the models. He will have nothing to do with the young models.
Gerald Marie Watts suspended for a minute, and then he was back in business for all these years. It's so outrageous.
It was crushing for all of us. The little bit I hoped that I had, that this information would be finally divulged worldwide, was snuffed out immediately. And I assumed at that moment this story would never be heard again, and it was devastating.
Yeah, I just don't understand how that even happened. Like, I just don't understand it.
It must be a powerful feeling to abuse people, have it exposed publicly, and then get away with it. I mean, I assume that he felt invincible.
I don't think that the fashion business had any great interest or inclination to change. Talking about some of the nasty stuff, the bugs in the mattress, was not going to fly. They just had no interest in it. And so I think that anyone who expected them to suddenly stand up and testify was kidding themselves.
I started investigating this in 2018. I'd been reporting on the Harvey Weinstein case. I'd realised that quite a few of his accusers were models, and they were telling me that they were introduced to him via modelling agents. Gerald Marie's name came up again and again, but quite often the women were scared to come forward about a man who was still working in the industry. Marie was still working at a small agency in Paris and working with models. It took really a few years to get enough evidence together and get enough women to come forward, and that includes the stories of Carrie Otis, Shauna Lee, and Jill Dodd.
When I talked to Lucy, I'll never forget, I was at my daughter's house, and I was walking around and around the block, and it was raining. And I came back and I was trying to explain to her, I cannot believe someone actually cares about this story. It was like a pivot of everything. It completely changed at that point.
In total, in the Guardian investigations into Gerald Marie, we told the stories of 16 different women, and their allegations spanned 20 years and highlighted a pattern of behaviour For example, a lot of them experienced the sexual assaults at Gerald Marie's home. And quite often as well, we kept hearing these allegations of the abuse being tied into work somehow, so sort of being rewarded for not speaking about it afterwards by being given the promise of high-profile work.
When I read the article, I think it just brought out a lot of traumatic feelings, just seeing everyone's stories back to back, one after the other. I felt awful for myself. I felt awful for the experiences that the other women had. I did not know any of those women existed before that investigation.
It's not that I thought I was a standalone case with Gerald, but my worldview was tiny. I was 17, like I was a kid. So I had no idea how far and wide the abuses went.
It's this huge, well-orchestrated system of abuse that has been going on for decades. It wasn't just a few bad apples, it was this much more systemic problem. And it wasn't just limited to the modelling industry. They were supplying this broader network of powerful men. And the most sinister is learning about Epstein's connection.
'66-year-old Jeffrey Epstein was arrested Saturday in New Jersey after returning from Paris on his private jet.
The 66-year-old is charged with sex trafficking and conspiracy. Now, prosecutors say the alleged sex ring may have involved dozens of underage teenage girls.
Prosecutors referred to Epstein as an alleged serial predator.
Jeffrey Epstein had relationships with various modelling agents and had varying levels of success in establishing agencies with them or going into business with them in some way. These are just some of the lawsuits that we've used as part of the Guardian reporting. This is the lawsuit of a woman that I spoke to a couple of years ago. She alleges that while she was working for Elite Model Management when she was about 15, she was sent by John Casablancas to Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein introduced himself as a photographer, and it goes on to explain that that he sexually assaulted her. Perhaps most significant is his relationship with Brunel, which in 2004 resulted in Brunel setting up an agency backed by Epstein in Miami, just down the road from Epstein's Palm Beach mansion.
Another arrest connected to financier and accused sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. This one in Paris, a famed modeling agent, Jean-Luc Brunel. He is facing potential charges of rape, sexual assault, including of minors, sexual harassment, and, like his good friend Jeffrey Epstein, sex trafficking of minors.
Epstein told one of his victims that he had slept with more than 1,000 women sent to him by Jean-Luc Brunel.
Virginia Giuffre accuses Brunel of supplying Epstein with more than 1,000 girls and women to abuse. So quite a staggering figure. She also alleges that she was forced to have sex with Brunel. And she says that it was Brunel that often arranged the travel documents for Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein to get these women from all around the world to wherever Epstein was. Brunel and Epstein's relationship dates back years. They were allegedly introduced by Ghislaine Maxwell back in the 80s. Brunel lived in Epstein's apartment building in New York for some time. This photograph was recently released as part of Ghislaine Maxwell's trial. So it's the first picture that we've seen of Ghislaine, Epstein and Brunel together. It's the first picture we've seen of Epstein and Brunel together before. And it's on Epstein's private jet, the so-called Lolita Express. And in the other pictures you can see Ghislaine is giving Epstein a foot rub. Brunel, according to Epstein's flight logs, he flew on Epstein's private jet 25 times, which really shows you how close they were and how much time they were spending together.
When I heard about the Jeffrey Epstein thing, I got this weird pit in my stomach. I had no idea they knew each other. This man, for decades, has been doing this horrible stuff to girls. And if he's not conquering them sexually, he's sending them off to his friends to do so.
It has dawned on me over the past year that There was a network of agents that were working to supply young women to rich, powerful men. And it wasn't until I spoke with a lawyer and he said to me, do you understand that that's classic human trafficking? And it hit me like a ton of bricks. It was so unbelievably painful.
It's taken 40 years for me to realize that I was trafficked. Someone purchased a meeting with me without my knowing about it. So yeah, I was pissed off when I realized it. And I was angry and I was hurt and it was devastating.
Moi, je suis témoin du fait que ce système existait. C'était des gens riches. Il appelle des gens responsables de l'agence de mannequins et il dit, j'ai vu cette fille, par exemple le magazine, tel magazine, page 20, eh ben, je la veux, combien il faut payer? Et donc il y avait quelqu'un qui répondait, qui dit, ben voilà, on peut vous l'avoir pour autant d'argent. C'était des sommes colossales.
Let's stop with trying to normalize and cover up and compartmentalize and make excuses for horrific human rights violations. It doesn't matter if we are fucking models. It's a human rights violation, period.
I was completely in shock at how expansive this web is, and it definitely falls under the category of human trafficking. And I was appalled to realize that I've been a part of it.
Hi, ladies.
Hi, Carrie.
Hi. How is everyone?
The floodgates opened and more women came forward. And then we started meeting once a week over Zoom. And the group is still growing.
It can take decades for the numbers to align and where you understand what actually happened to you.
Now there are lots of us.
With me, I felt much stronger once Carrie had come out and the other women, Jill and Lori, and it really made me feel much more comfortable to come forward. I think it's
Several survivors reached out to me and asked if I would be willing to put my name in a written testimony, a legal testimony against Gerald Marie to open up a criminal investigation in Paris. I started to think about the bigger picture. It could possibly be many more women. So it was myself and two other women that came forward first to offer our testimony, our written testimony, to French authorities.
The case has been accepted by the prosecutor because of number of victims. You know, at first it was only 4 victims who came forward, and then one more, and today we are at 14 victims, which is a really big number. The investigation has been opened against Gerald Marie for rape on minor, and sexual assault.
In a few short weeks, you will all be providing your testimonies as part of the French criminal investigation into Gerald Marie.
To be doing this all together and Paris to be 10 days away.
I feel ready. I feel like this year has been just massive preparation to go do this.
Talking to each other as
witnesses of what we all went through, it becomes more and more real.
I'm looking forward to meeting everybody in person, and I feel like you guys are all my sisters. I wish you lived next door to me so I could just go.
It's unbelievable that this is where all of us endured such horror, and that we're all willing to actually go back and testify and revisit this place. It's been incredibly powerful to be with this group of women There is something about safety in numbers. You know, it's felt doable, taking these big courageous steps. This is an amazing moment for myself and for so many survivors. For so many of us, certainly within the modeling industry, that have had to just normalize so much harassment and abuse for decades.
I am nervous that more is going to come back today that I haven't quite dealt with yet. So I'm scared about that for sure. Yeah, just the reality of what happened. It's hard to believe that I was raped and sold.
Hi, how are you? Good to see you. Good to see you. Thanks for being here. Hi, it's Jeff. Hi, nice to meet you.
What happened to you with Gérald Marie. It will be very focused on him, of course, so sometimes she will ask you, to get back to Gérald Marie.
Okay.
Everything you can remember about names, dates, because, they try to identify co-conspirators as well. And you can also, of course, talk about human trafficking. I think it's going to be interesting as soon as there's this link with Gérald Marie.
My deposition was 6.5 hours. I was determined not to cry, but the detective said something to me to the effect of no judgment. And I caught on to that and I started bawling. And the fact that she was saying to the interpreter, she wanted me to be able to speak without feeling like I was judged. When all of my life I've been judged by this, by so many people. And then to hear her say this, it broke me. And then that she used that same word later and it broke me again. So it shows me that I'm not 100% healed yet. I know that I'm not. I don't know if you can ever be 100% healed from these things.
Being here again brings back a lot of memories when I was here as a teenager. I think it's important for these conversations to be had as far as, the type of abuse of power that's gone on in the fashion industry for a very long time. Not just Gérald Marie specifically, although this is about him. I think the meaning of this is to help protect young girls in the industry as a whole. It's more than just being about myself. We're all here to help create change. I think it's sort of been healing in a way to, be able to talk about shared experiences. I guess I'm just realizing that I have hung on to a lot of the trauma, and it's maybe a way to kind of release it by realizing that there was a lot of others and that we can kind of stand together on this.
But there's this caveat. There's something called the statute of limitations. There's a French law which means you can't charge someone with a crime if it took place more than 30 years ago. I and the other survivors are time-barred in France, meaning we're all outside of the statute of limitations.
We don't have any recent victims, so Gérald Marie at this time cannot be officially charged for his crimes.
The hope and motivation of going all the way to Paris to give our testimony is really to help push forward this case. And the only way to do that is if somebody comes forward whose abuse took place less than 30 years ago. I have no doubt that there are women who are within the statute that will come forward, and once that happens in Paris, France, then it moves from a criminal investigation to a possible case against Gerald.
Breakfast. Oh, I'm waiting for this. I'm so hungry.
Thanks. There is a lawyer representing all these women in Paris right now against this agent from Elite named Gerald Marie. She's the same lawyer who's going to be going after Jean-Luc from the agency I worked for.
Ooh,
yeah.
That sounds promising.
And I'm going to be speaking with her today.
It's high time something is being done about it. So you have to speak up.
Yeah.
Jean-Luc Brunel was arrested in December 2020. He was indicted for the rape of a minor, and he remains in custody awaiting trial in Paris. Unlike the Gerald Marie investigation, a woman has come forward within the statute of limitations for the Jean-Luc Brunel case, which means that the case can move forwards to trial. And Marianne now feels ready to add her own testimony to the case in the hope that Brunel can finally be brought to account.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, it's Marianne.
I'm happy to, to talk to you, and I'd be happy to hear your story, of course.
What's your experience with him?
I try to go to sleep, and at some point I fall asleep, I guess, and then I wake up startled, and he's completely naked on top of me, trying to penetrate me. And I'm in shock, and I'm like scared, I'm freaked out.
Okay. And so, did it
try, or did he penetrate you, actually?
I had panties on. And if I didn't have that, it would have, who knows what would have happened. And then I flipped him to the side in complete shock, and then he pushed my head down to do oral on him, which I didn't want to do. I didn't want his skin touching me at all. I was completely hysterical about this, and then he made me jerk him off with my hand. I'm sorry, Mom.
So now you're ready, to submit your testimony to justice, to the French prosecutor?
Oh, absolutely. Anyone who wants to hear it, if it helps. I'm so willing to come there to do whatever.
Okay, I will mention that to the judge.
When I will submit your testimony, I will also let him know that you're ready to come to testify here in Paris.
That'd be fabulous. I hope we can get a bunch of women who've been hurt by Jean-Luc to do this, yeah.
Okay, bye, Marianne.
All right, au revoir. Bye-bye.
Wow.
Ooh, man,
I never heard all those details.
I know, I'm sorry.
That's okay, you don't have to be sorry about anything. I'm very proud of it that you can sit there and talk of it so openly. That takes guts.
Thank you. I feel incredibly supported and heard, and I also feel this, it's still affecting me, this horrible situation with him. I don't care about this statute of limitations thing. The trauma is there. It's very real. I heard that Jean-Luc Brunel had died in his cell. I just sat there and went, you've got to be kidding. This can't be happening. And I felt like all this time, the 14 months or so that he's been in jail, there was hope. There was a possibility. And then it completely just slammed the lid on that. And I was shocked at first. And then as the day wore on, I was super angry. I had buried it for so many years, and then opening up that file again and bringing it out, and then having to feel all those feelings, and then having the hope of him standing trial. was like, yes. And if he could get convicted, and maybe there's a possibility of him even admitting some wrongdoing, how healing that would be for so many people. And then have it just go end. Not possible. Now that this tragedy happened with Jean-Luc Brunel and we were denied an opportunity to go to court, it's even more imperative than ever before that the Gerard Marie case goes to court.
For the first Gerard Marie Guardian investigation, I spoke to Linda Evangelista, who was speaking for the first time about her ex-husband, Gerard Marie. And she said, I believe these women are telling the truth based on my own experiences. We quote her saying, during my relationship with Gerard Marie, I knew nothing of these sexual allegations against him, so I was unable to help these women. I admire their courage and strength for speaking up today.
Linda Evangelista came forward to support us, and I am incredibly relieved for that.
There have been supermodels who have come forward speaking out in support of Carrie Otis and the other women. Seeing big names like Carla Bruni, Paulina Poroskova and Karen Elson putting their names to this, you know, I think it's symbolic and hopefully it's the start of something more.
Finally, the conversation is being had. For decades, I've been speaking out, trying to prevent sexual trauma by empowering people with awareness, and I was alone until now.
Moi, j'étais très très jeune. Je faisais un déni. Je voyais, je disais rien. Ça, c'est un déni que j'ai porté pendant une période qui était courte. Parce qu'après, je me suis révolté. J'ai quitté l'élite en 2001. J'ai été plusieurs fois à la télévision française pour dire qu'il se passe des choses contre la loi avec des jeunes filles mineures. Je l'ai dit, je l'ai redit. Moi, je pense que les gens qui ont travaillé dans le milieu de la mode pendant toutes ces années-là sont complices. Parce qu'ils savaient, ils disaient rien.
This is a culture that has created an atmosphere in which these things are allowed to develop, take root, and blossom. And it's not going away. It's gotten a little bit better, and hopefully it will continue to get better.
Enfin, il y a un réveil. Et la politique a pris conscience de la situation. La seule chose que je demande, c'est que ce comportement soit puni pour que cela s'arrête. Moi, je veux que si ma fille me dise un jour, je veux devenir mannequin, je vais lui dire, oui papa, vas-y, c'est un métier propre.
Over the last year, the Model Alliance has been supporting survivors of Gerard Marie. While Marie's abuse has long been an open secret in the modeling industry, he has largely evaded any responsibility for his actions. That changes today.
It is really surreal to be back in Paris. It is roughly 30 years ago that this photo was taken of me. This was my first French Elle cover. I was 17 years old. And I remember it vividly. And at the same time the photo was taken, Gerard Marie had started to sexually assault me. I was dependent on Marie for my food, for my housing, and for my employment. I was young, alone, and in a foreign country with no family or support system for me. I knew I had to endure the abuse in order to continue working. That was made very clear to me. The industry that enabled my abuse and let men pay for access to women is still the same industry today. That's why being here in France and testifying to the French police with these women is so meaningful. Naming him sends a signal to other women who may be suffering that you're not alone, and we are here for you. We're doing this in support of other survivors and also an invitation for anyone who is within the statute of limitations. Please join us. We're here for you. This is what I've been waiting to do, to like be able to show up and have my story heard. I mean, it took until now for people to listen and talk about it. And now I'm standing with all these amazing women who are able to talk about it. And it's just huge.
The hope is not only justice, but it's a healing process for us personally, but it's also a good opportunity to help others come forward and to help others realize that they're not alone.
It feels actually really nice to be heard, that my story, on some level, maybe will make a difference.
What Gerald Marie did to me was horrible, and what a lot of other people did to me because they looked the other way is equally as horrible. So for me, this really is about sparking a greater conversation so that we can start to address these issues and see change.
If you have been affected by any of the issues raised in this programme, help is available online at sky.com/viewer support.